Buenas noches. ¿Cómo están? Hola. Bueno, pues llegamos a uno de los momentos más emocionantes, creo yo, de este mundo al revés. Al menos uno de los momentos más emocionantes para mí, cuando el comité organizador del encuentro decidió que iba a ser yo la persona que estuviera parada acá. Lo primero que sentí fue, yo creo que el vértigo natural que sentimos todos cuando te dicen que vas a presentar a una persona de la trayectoria de Richard Schechner. Y empecé a tejer varios textos. Escribí como unas 3 presentaciones distintas que terminaron en el bote de la basura. Y anoche tenía otra más, pero esta mañana decidí que ninguna de esas presentaciones era digna de este mundo al revés. Convivir con la bibliografía implica también dejarse atravesar por el cuerpo de la otra persona. Para saber sobre la trayectoria académica de Richard Schechner, basta poner en Google su nombre y tenemos una gran cantidad de información, mucha digitalización de sus textos. Y mucha información que sería imposible además en unos cuantos minutos dar cuenta de ella. Creo además que este espacio y que todos ustedes están ansiosos por escucharlo a él, no a mí. Así es que voy a hablar solamente de algunos datos que me parece importante revelar. Creo que si algo caracteriza el trabajo y la trayectoria de Richard Schechner como académico, como artista, y también como persona, es la generosidad. Generosidad y amplitud de miradas. Es, en todo el sentido de la palabra, un cuerpo performativo, lleno de potencias teatrales, de belleza y de integridad. Quiero hablar entonces hoy un poco sobre la humanidad de Richard Schechner, la humanidad que aquellos que hemos estado compartiendo este espacio del mundo al revés hemos podido ver en estos días. Ayer circulando en el coche de la Pocha Nostra, yo pensaba qué maravilla saberse listo para la experiencia. La experiencia, la palabra experiencia siempre tiene esa doble articulación, porque viene del latín per, de percutir, pero también ese per quiere decir peligro. Yo observaba ayer a Schechner sentado en ese auto y me daba cuenta de esa apertura constante de su cuerpo a ser atravesado y al mismo tiempo a cargar consigo estas marcas iterables, estas huellas de una trayectoria de vida llena de experiencia y también de apertura a lo desconocido. Platicando generosamente en un café, me hablaba él sobre un platillo francés provenzal, bouillabaisse, que es un platillo que es una sopa que se hace con diversos pescados. Son pescados que es una sopa que se hace a fuego lento, se hierve a fuego bajo y dura mucho tiempo. Pero además son los pescados que, investigando yo hoy un poco, son esos que quedan en la cesta, en la parte de abajo de las cestas de los pescadores. Es decir, esos que fueron los primeros en ser pescados, pero que al mismo tiempo quedan sepultados por todos los otros y que nadie más quiere, un poco, porque es un pescado que no está en perfecto estado para el ojo humano. Me parecía maravillosa el relato que me hacía Richard Schechner en ese café, porque pensaba yo en cómo de alguna manera me parece que su trabajo es como el pescador que va al fondo de la cesta, ¿no? Al lugar de lo ancestral, al lugar de lo atávico, del ritual, y también al lugar de aquello que es un exceso de sentido que pocas veces queremos ver. Platicando también con él, hablábamos de cuatro tejidos, 4 hilos en su vida. Me hablaba del profundo sentido que tiene para él que uno de estos hilos sea su vida familiar, Por otro lado está su trabajo artístico, que es un trabajo artístico que nosotros sabemos que está conformado por obras teatrales, por imaginarios de performance y performativos, por una trayectoria de trabajo teórico importante, por narrativa y, para mi sorpresa, porque eso sí que no lo conocía yo, también de poesía. Es fundador del New Orleans Group y de Performance Group of New York, ¿no? con una gran y enorme, vasta cantidad de trabajo ahí. Por otro lado, otro de esos hilos que ha permanecido durante mucho tiempo en su vida es su trabajo como editor. Es editor actualmente de la serie Enactments, publicada por el Seagull Book, y del World of Performance, publicada por Routledge. En esta vida de editor podemos también entender desde otras miradas esa generosidad, esa enorme cantidad de textos que ha ayudado a reunir y de los cuales creo que tenemos, hablando como académica de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, un gran pendiente todavía para la traducción. Por otro lado está su vida como docente, una vida docente que lo ha llevado a ser profesor emérito en la Tisch School of the Arts en la NYU, pero que también le ha permitido entender la docencia de una manera profunda como un acto continuo de todos los días. Y él me lo decía, y al mismo tiempo, cuando escuchaba yo que lo decía, me daba cuenta que estaba yo siendo ahí mismo alumna de él por un minuto. Creo que cualquiera que respire un ratito caminando junto a él es atrapado por esa energía de este maestro permanente. Su trabajo tiene un alcance internacional, ha sido traducido a más de 18 idiomas. Actualmente existe también el Centro de Estudios Richard Schechner en Shanghái. Eso nada más para dar una muestra de hasta dónde ha llegado su pensamiento. Y en estas vidas tejidas, Schechner me regaló dos imágenes de su propia vida que para mí fueron muy reveladoras y que hablan justamente sobre esa generosidad, pero me parece a mí también que de la construcción no solamente de una vida anecdóticamente hablando profunda, sino de la develación de entender el cuerpo como el lugar para producir pensamiento. Me hablaba, y vuelvo al platillo del que les estaba hablando, porque me hablaba de ese platillo justamente contándome que él había sido alguna vez cocinero, no chef, cocinero. En 1958, en Massachusetts, en Provincetown, mientras era además albergado por Mary Heaton Bors, que le decía que era The New O'Neill. Él, dentro de la cocina, como cocinero, guardaba algunos bocadillos de esos que la gente no consumía para alimentar a su grupo de actores. Entender el cuerpo del actor, alimentarlo, no solamente desde la generosidad de la comida, sino desde el espíritu constante de estar ahí, pensándose como cocinero, como director, como aquel ser que cuida y entiende el cuerpo de los otros. Otra de las experiencias que me regaló fue que del 58 al año 60, 1958-1960, se enlistó en el ejército como voluntario para probar una vida menos cómoda, me dijo, para probar que era capaz de seguir las reglas de aquellos a los que jamás hubiera obedecido, para entender un otro cuerpo. Los que hemos leído quizá muchos años sus textos, creo que sabemos que de alguna manera implican pensar el sistema desde otro lugar. Para mí fue muy interesante saber que él había llegado a esta experiencia de una manera voluntaria, a vivir ese otro sitio, a descentrarse, a pensarse desde ese otro lugar, para entender no desde fuera ni desde el prejuicio, sino desde lo que Deleuze también llama encontrar puntos de fuga dentro del sistema. Él me aseguraba ayer que eso le había cambiado la vida. Yo pensaba, nos la cambió a muchos, porque a partir de esa escritura tan generosa hemos entendido también que los estudios del performance implican esa apertura de miradas, implican sobre todo lo que nos permite hacer. Y bueno, quisiera cerrar esta presentación, que es una presentación, pues sí, poco académica, insisto, tenía 3 papers, pero ninguno de ellos daba cuenta de la experiencia de este mundo al revés, ni de lo atravesado que está mi cuerpo en estos 3 días. Ayer él me mostraba unas frases que tenía en su cartera. Yo hoy tengo en mi cartera un boleto de metro del performance que acabamos de tener hace un ratito en el salón de danza con el nombre de una de las chicas desaparecidas. Y pensaba eso, la cartera como el lugar de resguardo, la cartera también como el lugar para que performativamente haya cosas que no se nos olviden. Richard Schechner me mostraba cómo ha cambiado de todas las carteras que ha tenido en su vida esos mismos mensajes de unas galletas chinas. Y hoy para mí fue paradójico que antes de este momento recibiera yo un boleto que acabo de meter en mi cartera, que pasará muchos años también ahí. Y bueno, desde este lugar quiero también enunciar como mexicana, como profesora del Colegio de Literatura Dramática y Teatro, un compromiso con esta institución y un compromiso también a la trayectoria de Richard Schechner de impulsar las publicaciones que creo que tendrían que haber estado aquí desde hace muchos años. Yo este encuentro lo hice pensando siempre en mis alumnos y espero que lo que quede después de que todos ustedes, todas y todos ustedes partan, sea una energía capaz de generar esos proyectos. Yo aquí quiero decir que ya he pactado con Schechner que vamos a hacer algunas traducciones. No sé todavía cómo lo voy a conseguir, pero lo voy a hacer. Y la primera publicación será ese poema. Porque aquella traducción que tenemos en el Fondo de Cultura Económica ha implicado también problemas bastante fuertes. Yo esperaría que en este momento, que la RAE, para los que quieran creer en ella, y estén dispuestos a que sea lo que rija su vida, ha autorizado ya y ha dicho que la palabra performance es español también, ya en estos momentos. Yo esperaría que la siguiente traducción sea estudios del performance y no estudios de la representación. Y bueno, nada más me queda antes de ceder este espacio a Schechner, decir que espero que vengan muchos años más de la mirada profunda, de la templanza y de poder escuchar y sentir la maravilla que es Richard Schechner. Gracias.
Before I begin, I need to do a couple of things. I want to thank Diana Taylor for conceiving and leading the Hemi and for shaping these encuentros. She has changed the world. I want to thank the Hemi workers, both in New York and here in Mexico, for all the help they have given me. There are so many, but let me give a shout out to Didanwy, Kent, Marcial Godoy, and Natalia Sanjur. Let me also thank Emilio Mendez, professor of theater studies here at UNAM. Throughout my stay, Emilio has been a guide, a brilliant and passionate advocate for performance studies, and a warm companion. And of course, I thank the myriad artists, students, teachers, techies, workers, everyone who are making this Encuentro such a deep, learning, participatory, and fun experience. Muchas, muchas gracias todas. Take a deep breath. We're going somewhere else now. Quote, an Englishman needing a pair of striped trousers in a hurry for New Year festivities goes to his tailor, who takes his measurements. That's the lot. Come back in 4 days. I'll have it ready. 4 days later. So sorry, come back in a week. I've made a mess of the seat. Good, that's all right. A neat seat can be very ticklish. A week later. Frightfully sorry. Come back in 10 days. I've made a hash of the crotch. Good. Can't be helped. A snug crotch is always a teaser. 10 days later. Dreadfully sorry. Come back in a fortnight. I've made a balls of the fly. Good. At a pinch, a smart fly is a stiff proposition. Well, to make it short, the bluebells are blowing and he bollockses the buttonholes. God damn you to hell, sir! Now it's indecent! There are limits. In 6 days, do you hear me? 6 days. God made the world. Yes, sir, no less. Sir, the world. And you are not bloody well capable of making me a pair of trousers in 3 months? But my dear sir, look at the world. And look at my trousers. There's a lot going on in Beckett's parable from Endgame. Not least, with proper attention to the details, we can make a better world, but it's going to take great effort, many mistakes corrected, and a very long time. Also, if we follow ancient tradition, the world according to the book of Genesis, we will end up in a mess. Indeed, more than 1 million species are ending up, and most definitely we are in a mess. About art, too, Beckett's parable speaks. The world we actually live in, the world we make, fix, abhor, revise, never get right, feel pinched in, misfits over and over, but can be made right. Those trousers are the world of our own conceiving, gestating, and doing. Art. Perfectible, in theory at least. Tragedy's main theme is the rule of law, and from that, obedience to properly constituted authority. God, the fates, destiny, nature. People get into big trouble, fatal trouble, when they go against the law. From Oedipus's blinding as a reminder of what he refused to see, to our collective swamp death at the conclusion of global warming, overcrowding, and mass extinction. Disobey at the risk of catastrophe. No, worse. Disobey and catastrophe is inevitable. Comedy operates from a different premise. No authority is, quote, properly constituted, unquote, because power in and of itself is greed and corruption. Authority is exposed and mocked, turned upside down. Laws need to be broken. A lot depends on accident and chance, not quite the same. Gods play dice and descend in machines to reverse the inevitable. Youth defeating old age wins the endgame and is happy. So which world do we live in? Both, and at the same time. Hollywood screenwriter Charles MacArthur and Charlie Chaplin were discussing comedy. MacArthur, quote, "How could I make a lady walking down Fifth Avenue slip on a banana peel and still get a laugh? Do I show first the banana peel, then the lady approaching, then she slips? Or do I show the lady first, then the banana peel, and then she slips?" Chaplin, "Neither. You show the lady approaching, then you show the banana peel, then you show the lady and the banana peel together. Then she steps over the banana peel and disappears down a manhole." So are we who've collectively stepped over plagues, famines, and nuclear war to vanish into the consequences of our abundance? Chapter 2. The end game is an old story. Seers, prophets, and crazies have predicted the end of the world untold times. By fire, flood, rapture, cosmic collision, you name it. This time it's not God or an asteroid, but ourselves who are to blame. The manhole Chaplin placed at the end of the banana peel trail, the man-made hole we're falling into, is our own. This time, the difference is that scientists see it coming, and it's not the end of the world, but rather the extinction of species, the submerging of coastlines and island nations, and the spoiling of habitats. The most recent and comprehensive forecast of doom is the May 2019, just a couple of weeks ago, May 2019 report of the United Nations Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. That report is worth quoting at length, and I will. Quote, "The biosphere, which humanity depends on as a whole, is being altered to an unparalleled degree across all spatial scales. Biodiversity, the diversity within species, between species, and of ecosystems. It is declining faster than at any time in human history. Nature across most of the globe has now been significantly altered by multiple human drivers, with the great majority of indicators of ecosystems and biodiversity showing rapid decline. 75% of the land surface is significantly altered. 66% of the ocean area is experiencing increasing cumulative impacts, and over 85% of wetlands have been lost. Human actions threaten more species with global extinction now than ever before. Around 1 million species already face extinction. The global rate of species extinction is already at least tens to hundreds of times higher than it has averaged over the past 10 million years. Globally, local varieties and breeds of domesticated plants and animals are disappearing. This loss of diversity poses a serious risk to global food security. The rate of global change in nature during the past 50 years is unprecedented in human history, yet most international societal and environmental goals will not be achieved based on current trajectories. The negative trends in biodiversity and ecosystem functions are projected to continue to worsen in response to indirect drivers such as rapid human population growth, unsustainable production and consumption, and associated technological development. The UN scientists do see a way out. I continue. Nature can be conserved, restored, and used sustainably while simultaneously meeting other global society goals through urgent and concerted efforts fostering transformative change. Transformative change. Achieving a sustainable economy involves making fundamental reforms to economic and financial systems and tackling poverty and inequality as vital parts of sustainability, unquote. But do you think we humans will make such a transformative change and effect fundamental change? More on that anon. The root problem is population, of course. Too many people wanting the good life, or in many desperate instances, any life. In 1800, the global human population was 1 billion. It took until 1800 to 1960, to get to 3 billion. Today, roughly 60 years later, there are 7.5 billion. The upward trend is exponential and unsupportable. Thomas Malthus, in his 1798, quote, essay on the principle of population, quote, foresaw it clearly. I know you all know Malthus, but I'll read 2 paragraphs. Quote, I have read some of the speculations on the perfectibility of man and of society with great pleasure. I have been warmed and delighted with the enchanting picture which they hold forth. I ardently wish for such happy improvements, but I see great and, to my understanding, unconquerable difficulties in the way to them. The power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in the earth to produce subsistence for man. Pardon the gender, I'll read his words. Population, when unchecked, increases in a geometrical ratio. Subsistence increases only in an arithmetical ratio. A slight acquaintance with the numbers will show the immensity of the first power in comparison to the second. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 versus 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. This natural inequality of the 2 powers of population and of production in the earth, and that great law of our nature which must constantly keep their effects equal, form the great difficulty that to me appears insurmountable in the way to the perfectibility of society. All other arguments are of slight and subordinate consideration in comparison of this. I see no way by which man can escape from the weight of this law which pervades all animated nature. No fancied equality, no agrarian regulations in their utmost extent could remove the pressure of it even for a single century, unquote. Malthus was wrong for a time. He was wrong in the time frame it took. Malthus's forecast has been forestalled by ever more productive farming and a seemingly endless store of lands, seas, rivers, and lakes to settle, strip, cultivate, dam, mine, and fish. Under the aegis of imperialism and scientific rationalism, humans collectively operate as if there is always a somewhere to conquer, extract, exploit, and profit from. But it's time to listen to Malthus, because we no longer live in an endlessly bountiful world for humans to take and use. We need to recognize that Homo sapiens is an invasive species approaching an endpoint. I'll repeat that. Homo sapiens is an invasive species reaching an endpoint. Act 3. What if humans went extinct? Would that be an Aristotelian tragedy? Philosopher Todd May took up the question in a 2018 New York Times op-ed. Now I'll quote philosopher May. In a drama, the tragic character is often someone who commits a wrong, usually a significant one, but with whom we feel sympathy. Sophocles' Oedipus, Shakespeare's Lear, and Arthur Miller's Willy Loman might stand as examples. In this case, the tragic character is humanity. It is humanity that is committing a wrong whose elimination would likely require the elimination of the species, but with whom we might be sympathetic nonetheless. To make that case, let me start with a claim that I think will be at once depressing and, upon reflection, uncontroversial. Human beings are destroying large parts of the inhabitable earth and causing unimaginable suffering to many of the animals that inhabit it. If this were all to the story, there would be no tragedy. The elimination of the human species would be a good thing, full stop. But there is more to the story. Human beings bring things to the planet that other animals cannot. For example, we bring an advanced level of reason that can experience wonder at the world in a way that is foreign to most, if not all, other animals. We create art. We engage in sciences that seek to understand the universe and our place in it. Were our species to go extinct, all of that would be lost. Doesn't the existence of those practices outweigh the harm we bring to the environment and the animals within it? To address that question, let's ask another one. Listen to this, very interesting. Suppose a terrorist planted a bomb in the Louvre, and the first responders had to choose between saving people in the museum and saving the art. How many of us would seriously consider saving the art? So then, how much suffering and death of non-human life would we be willing to countenance to save our art, our sciences, and so forth? There is a tragic aspect to all this. I'm still quoting May. In many dramatic tragedies, the suffering of the protagonist is brought about through her or his own actions. It is Oedipus's killing of his father that starts the train of events that leads to his tragic realization. It is Lear's high-handedness towards his daughter Cordelia that leads to his demise. It may also turn out that it is through our own actions that we human beings bring about our extinction. It may well be also that the extinction of humanity would make the world better off, and yet it would be a tragedy. I don't want to say this for sure since the issue is complex, but it certainly seems a live possibility, and that by itself disturbs me, unquote. Of course, just as a tree falling on a desert island makes no sound except in the ears of God, because no one hears it, the tragedy of Homo sapiens is not such because there are no spectators, unless one regards as audience the animals who are spared by our species' demise, and also the mind of God. Or maybe it's not a tragedy, but a comedy, a farce even. We humans step over the banana peels of war and disease and down the manhole of extinction. But even worse than what's happening on Earth is the fate of Gaia's twin sister. Forget about Mars, guys. Forget about Mars. Let's think of Gaia's twin sister, Venus. Nearly the same size and composition as Earth, and also within the solar system's habitable zone, Venus, and here I am doing a thought experiment, once thrived with life, including intelligent beings, very smart, highly evolved, also like us. Venusians enjoyed a carbon-based energy system. Alas, they let it get out of hand. A runaway hothouse effect resulted in the Venus we observe today, a CO2 methane sulfuric acid atmosphere cloaking the planet whose surface temperature is 870 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists believe that Venus once had surface water, as Earth does in abundance, but long ago it evaporated. Today, Earth is a blue planet because of her oceans. Venus is an orange-red one because of her deadly greenhouse gas atmosphere. 4. Not so fast. Hope springs eternal. What can we do about the world? How can we make that perfect pair of pants? In 2016, entomologist naturalist Edwin O. Wilson proposed that humans withdraw from half the world's land surfaces with a comparable reduction of ocean fishing in order to ensure not only our own survival, but the survival of millions of other species. He wrote in his book, Half Earth, quote, The only hope for the species still living is a human effort commensurate with the magnitude of the problem. The only solution to the sixth extinction, now in full flower, is to increase the areas of inviolable natural reserves to half the surface of the earth or greater. This expansion requires fundamental shifts in moral reasoning concerning our relation to the living environment. There are true wildernesses around the world that, if simply left alone, will endure as wildernesses. In addition, there are mostly wild places whose living environments can be returned close to their original condition, either by the removal of a few invasive species or the reintroduction of one to several extirpated keystone species, or both. At the opposite extreme are landscapes so degraded that their original life must be restored from the ground up by inserting soil, microorganisms, and eukaryotic species like algae, fungi, plants, and animals in certain combinations and in particular sequences. There won't be an immediate drop in the total world population. The shift to lower fertility can happen during 1 or 2 generations. In every country where women have gained some degree of social and financial independence, their average fertility has dropped by a corresponding amount through individual personal choice. The United Nations projected that by 2100, the world population, even as it decelerates towards zero growth, will reach between 9.6 billion and 12.3 billion. That is a heavy burden for an already overpopulated planet. But a turn downward in the early 22nd century is inevitable, unquote. That's why I'm asking us to think in the long term. We think, what's going on at the Encuentro tomorrow? What shall I do when I get back to wherever I'm from next week? Oh, maybe I'll live 80 years. We don't think in terms of centuries or tens of centuries. If we want to solve this problem, we have to think and behave in the very long term. And that sometimes means a sacrifice by the people on the front line, which is more your generation, I admit, than mine, because I'm quite old. But it needs to be done. Otherwise, somewhere down the line, the next generation won't occur, or it'll be in such a horrendous situation, it will not want to occur. Inherent in Wilson's plan is the recognition of a paradigm shift of what humans are in relation to nature. This shift has been happening over the past several centuries, accelerating greatly in the last 50 years as the human population more than doubled. For most of the time humans have existed, we have been, quote, in, quote, nature, contained by nature. The non-human environment was dominant. Human settlements were relatively scarce and scattered. I'm talking now in terms of, the human species came onto this planet a couple of 100,000 years ago, proto-humans about 2 million years ago, modern humans around 70, 80,000 years ago. So I'm talking in those terms. In those terms, we have been in nature, contained by nature. The non-human environment was dominant. Human settlements were relatively scarce and scattered. It took courage and risk to, quote, explore, to climb mountains, cross seas, to, quote, conquer nature, even migrate. But as the number of people increased, so did the amount of land given to farming, mining, and drilling. Networks of roads radically multiplied with the advent first of rail and then of automobile, and finally of air. Land, sea, and air routes opened for millions from everywhere to anywhere. Even the most formidable places become more or less ordinary. Witness the climber jam this spring at the summit of Mount Everest. Is there anywhere some safari booker, some cruise line operator, or people smuggler doesn't go? Restrictions when they exist are political, not ecological. For enough money, you can even rocket into orbit. Whatever land is deemed useful is used and overused. So-called nature, the wild animals more or less left to themselves, is increasingly rare and soon will no longer exist. Where previously we people needed protection from animals, now the animals, even the fiercest legendary hunters, big cats, bears, sharks, In fact, any animal of size, and many smaller ones too, need protection from us. Now we contain nature. The process is irreversible, even if some species considered good viewing or entertainment are minimally repopulated by cloning or restored genes. Whatever. The days of vast herds of wildebeests or elephants like the American bison of earlier centuries will be gone. Wilson's noble plan notwithstanding, the world of nature has become a performance enacted in parks, reserves, and zoos. Which brings me to the second scenario for a, quote, better, quote, outcome to the crisis of the Anthropocene. The tech fix. Tech is what people do very well and have been doing throughout the evolution of our species, not new. Finding or inventing the means to solve specific problems. That we do very well. In the tech fix, we humans learn to transcend our political, social, religious, and ideological conflicts. We concentrate our skills on hydroponic land farming and desalinization and de-desertification, on ocean cultivation of the fish, on seaweeds and algae. We replace fossil fuels with solar, wind, water, and safe fusion, not fission, fusion nuclear. We protect key coastal cities with seawalls and pumps. We relocate people whose land cannot be saved. We settle territories made habitable by global warming, and so on, through whatever human genius thinks and devises. If this is what we do, the whole world would be profoundly humanized. Much of it urban, because there will be twice the number of people as now, and more. As I said, nature as we've known it will be restricted to reserves, and even there, it will be second nature, a performative simulation of what was. The tech fix is where we're headed now. Are iPhones and their progeny the best we can hope for? Yes, one could argue. Human nature is biologically coded to become wholly artificial, to evolve AI, cyborgs, robots, and the rest. Possibly. In such a world, the sunsets will still be beautiful, but the world over which the sun sets will be a machine. Then there's the extraterrestrial fix. The first humans came out of Africa in waves, slowly but systematically taking over the world, diversifying, expanding, hunting, gathering. And then as populations increased, settling, cultivating, building, conquering, colonizing, and exterminating each other, and non-human species too. Driving animals to extinction is not a modern trait. It's just that there are so many more of us, and our means of killing have improved. And we are taking notice, even deciding that it's a bad thing. For most of the eons, humans have populated the world, killing other animals for food, sport, to demonstrate courage, the Hemingway ethos, and to make more room for people has been the norm. But now that the world is overcrowded with people, some are aiming for the stars. Elon Musk is not alone in conceiving of the solar system and beyond as the, quote, new frontier, quote, using a primeval conceptual model common to our species. Once a group runs out of space and or resources, or simply out of an inborn urge to adventure, it moves into, quote, new territory. And if someone happens to be there, dominate them, colonize them, exterminate them. You know, I was at the Temple of Mejor yesterday, and I realized, of course the Spanish did what they did, but the Aztecs did what they did to the people who were before them. And the Spanish would not have been so successful if the ordinary people that the Aztecs ruled hadn't given them support. It's an evil that's currently Western and European, but it's inherent in the human species, this drive to exterminate, dominate, colonize. Once a group runs out of space and or resources or simply out of an inborn urge to adventure, it moves into new territory. So we postmodern humans will terraform the moon, learn to live on Mars or on one of Jupiter's or Saturn's moons before launching ourselves into the vastness of galactic space. Both the tech and the extraterrestrial scenarios are performative imaginaries in which we find ways to keep doing exactly what we've been doing from the origin of our species, expanding and dominating. The tech fix is possible, while the extraterrestrial scenario is science fiction. Expanding into already habitable regions is what humans are equipped to do, going where there is at least air and water. Making the profoundly hostile environment of any planet or the moon, other than Earth, livable for masses of people is less than likely. Maybe a few hundred, even 1 million or 2, but not for billions. As for people zipping along near, at, or faster than the speed of light, which would be necessary to reach another galaxy, or even other habitable planets in our own Milky Way galaxy, ask Einstein about it. 5. So what's to do here and now? And how can art generally, and performance especially, do its part? If we are not just selecting items for the orchestra of the Titanic to play, what might we do? We can be like Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old who in March and May 2019 organized student strikes against climate change. Students from 125 countries took part. We can fly to fewer conferences because airplanes pipe mighty amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. We can avoid plastics, use cloth shopping bags, walk and bike instead of driving or taking Uber, eat vegan, or at least cut down on beef tacos. And on through a very long list of actions that make difference while raising our own and others' consciousness. And of course, we can do art about the animals, about mass extinctions, about our existential situation. We can demonstrate and intervene. We can admire the yes men for exposing and sending up the bad guys, and myriad other artists, many of whom are in this room, too, who are doing powerful, excellent work. But I ask my colleagues, my students, I ask all of us, can we drive enough pressure to fundamentally change governments and corporations? It's more than a tough question. Let's take, for example, and I'm sorry that my dean, Allison Green, isn't here to hear this. Let's take, for example, New York University, home of the Hemispheric Institute for Performance and Politics, of Performance and Politics. I taught there at NYU for 50 years, including 5 years at NYU's Grand Campus in Abu Dhabi. The physical campus there cost billions. The operating charges are not cheap. The money is petroleum dollars. Will I go back to Abu Dhabi if invited? Yes. Ask me why during the Q&A, or even privately. Is NYU, New York, and the Hemi implicated? Yes. Even if not directly, the whole thing is a system. There's nothing outside the corporation broadly defined. Remember, for example, that the Rockefeller Foundation is money derived from oil, and the Ford Foundation from automobiles. I understand foundation money used to support good causes to be reparations. We should demand that they pay it all out, and quick. Take a deep breath. Let's go back to art. Hemi's stated purpose for this Encuentro is, quote, to theorize and instrumentalize satire, humor, laughter, music, and noise in their broadest senses in order to make visible, unfold, denounce, fracture, and revert the assemblages of power behind these alarming processes, unquote. So we are instructed to bite the many hands that feed us. I ask, perhaps naively, perhaps slyly, perhaps with an old man's immunity, can we really do this? Or must we be satisfied with playing at doing it? That is, performing in the weak sense of that concept. The problem of extinction will be solved either by a fundamental, transformative change in consciousness, behavior, and political action, or, to put it bluntly, our species, along with millions of others, are going down. Can we really respond to the call to, quote, fracture the assemblages of power, unquote? Novelist P.D. James saw it coming in 1992 when in The Children of Men she wrote, quote, of the 4 billion life forms which have existed on this planet, 3,960,000,000 are now extinct. We don't know why. Some by wanton extinction, some through natural catastrophe, some destroyed by meteorites and asteroids. In the light of these mass extinctions, it really does seem unreasonable to suppose that Homo sapiens should be exempt. Our species will have been one of the shortest lived of all, a mere blink, you may say, in the eye of time, unquote. But back then, and it does seem long ago, doesn't it? Although it's only 27 years. James foresaw extinction by natural causes, not by murder or maybe suicide, though she was a crime writer. And I detect a wink rather than a blink in James's eye. She is talking about what she thinks won't happen anytime soon. However, not so Elizabeth Colbert, author of The Sixth Extinction, who put it very differently in February 2019, a few months ago, at Princeton University. Now I'm quoting Colbert. Quote, I always say, if you're not pessimistic, you're not paying attention. It's very hard to look at the trend lines and the numbers and the political situation and not be extremely disturbed right now. I know there's a lot of energy, and I'm hopeful that some of that energy will translate into action. But if you look at what's actually happening, it's pretty bleak. If I were king of the world, I would say we should try to put pretty big swaths of the earth that are still relatively intact aside for those creatures that currently reside in them. I think that's our best hope at this point, unquote. So Colbert goes back to Wilson's half-Earth proposal, Gaia's best hope. But as I stand here before you this evening, unlikely to happen. 6. So here we are, the world as it is, left holding Beckett's endgame pants. In 1992, not long before he died, in the same year as James's The Children of Men, John Cage at Stanford University read his, quote, Overpopulation in Art, unquote, a mesostic poem which vertically kept repeating the phrase overpopulation in art. The impetus is Cagean activism, that is, passive and optimistic to the point of unharried ecstasy. Let me select from Cage's poem, and I hope my great translators will do it justice. Quote, about 1948 or 50, the number of people living all at once equaled the number who had ever lived at any time, all added together. The present, as far as numbers go, became equal to the past. We are now in the future. Has it doubled? Has it quadrupled? All we know now for sure is the dead are in the minority. They are outnumbered by us who are living. What does this do to our communicating? To stop the estrangement between us, to overcome the patriarchal thinking, the authoritarian structures, and the coldness, the human not-togetherness. The necessity to develop a culture that consciously opposes the ruling culture, a culture which we create, we determine, which overcomes the passive consumers' attitudes, and which is not ruled by profiteering. Even though the future is already here, many are still living in the past. All governments are striking examples of what's out of date and inappropriate to our proper business, our evolution. Though there are more of us, all of us live in the same place, the planet Earth. There is no difference between what happens to some of us and what happens to others. Whatever happens, happens to all of us. Our problems are not various, they are identical. The purifying of water and air, stopping the removal of fossil fuels from the earth, developing solar energy, etc. We begin by believing it can be done, getting rid of pessimism, blindly clinging to optimism. The planet has become a single person, unquote. After his 25-minute performance, and you can get to it on YouTube, it's worth seeing, Cage answered some questions. He concluded, quote, I have tried to bring together my thoughts that are of an optimistic nature, and I have been unhappy in recent times with conversations and what I read and so forth that are so gloomy and that are so hopeless. I brought together something that could give us reasons for hope as much as I could. And the audience at Stanford applauded and went home. 7, my last chapter. Psychoanalyst Erik Erikson, coiner of the phrase identity crisis, developed a theory of human life cycle, 8 phases, from infancy to adolescence to adulthood to old age. At each phase, a person, immersed in and to some degree determined by social circumstances, comes to a crisis, literally a crossroads, and makes a choice, often unconsciously. The crisis choice of old age is between despair and disgust and integrity and wisdom. After Erik's death in 1994, Joan N. Erikson, his collaborator and wife of 67 years, completed the work on the life cycle, emphasizing the final stage. She pointed out that the root of the English word wisdom is the Sanskrit word Veda, to see, to know. But to see what? The destruction of the world as we've experienced it, or some better future? Urging humility, Joan Erikson wrote, quote, old age demands that one garner and lean on all previous experience, maintaining awareness and creativity with a new grace. Part of the human condition is to lack wisdom about ourselves and our planet. We must become aware of how little we know, unquote. But she doesn't stop there. She writes, quote, I made a further discovery. Thousands of years ago, the word for ear and for wisdom in the Sumerian language seems to have been one and the same. If wisdom is conveyed through sound as well as sight, then singing, rhythmic gesture, and dance are included as its conveyors and amplifiers. Now we can see that wisdom belongs to the world of actuality to which our senses give us access. It is with our senses that we understand through sight and hearing, enriched and supported by scent, taste, and touch, for all animals have these gifts and attributes, unquote. Joan Erikson further discovers that the word integrity, the partner to wisdom, is etymologically rooted in tact, as in contact, intact, tactile, tangible, and touch. The ancients understood that wisdom and integrity were actually felt, sung, and danced, story told, transmitted by all the senses performing in harmony. Harmony, yes, but sometimes sweet, sometimes bitter, sometimes smooth, sometimes sharp-pointed. If Beckett's tailor worked by stitching textiles, that is, making texts, until he accomplished his endgame pens, then let us wear these trousers to our dances and fiestas, our dramas, farces, and tragedies. And that is where I am. My brain is in despair, disgusted by how badly so many humans are behaving, while my belly, my integrated senses, offers me the wisdom of its appetites. With Cage, I blindly cling to optimism. Thank you. While they're fixing that, there are microphones here. I want to say something before I take what questions. I have no idea what time it is, so first of all, what time is it, please? So we have about a half hour that we can have a discussion. It may be shorter. It can go a little bit longer. It depends on the discussion. Is it working now? That one, I mean? Thank you, Rick. So I want to say that, I've done a lot of writing in my life. This was one of the most difficult pieces I've ever written. Not simply the physical writing, but the visceral encounter with what I was writing. It brings tears to my eyes, because this is not a master's thesis. I have one. This is something that, after doing this research, I'm convinced is true. I'm not a religious person in the rapture, end of the world sense. I don't think the world will end. I think probably humans will continue in some way, but I can't stomach the kind of life. And so it's with that as I wrote, I found out, and that perhaps someone out here will have some ideas. And of course, we must dance, even if it is on the bank of our own deck of our own Titanic. But we must generate the power for this transformative change. If not in our generation, in the next generation. Don't fall for CNN's breaking news. The news that's been facing us has been breaking for thousands of years. We're getting a grasp of it now. It will take time to put that grasp into action. Walking backwards is more difficult than walking forwards. It will go slowly. But we must begin to take the reasonable, loving, backward steps. And our generation, your generation, can do it through consciousness and slow steps. That's why I said, a plastic bag, a cloth bag, and rather than plastic. These are trivial things. But the trivial begin to change, and you bring them to your students, to your children, and it will happen. But we can't become impatient even in the safety. I'll use the Titanic metaphor one more time. They could have gotten everyone off if they had rehearsed the lifeboats and if they had gone to the right lifeboats. There was enough room, but they panicked and they went down. 1,700 of them didn't have to. There was enough room. There was enough time, but they went down. They panicked. Do not panic. There's enough room, there's enough time, and step by step by small step. Now, I would love to hear suggestions, reactions, comments. Yes, Antonio.
Les pedimos por favor que las preguntas vamos
a
haciendo una fila.
Let me put this out, Antonio, so I can understand.
Please, if you have a question, stand in line.
So urgent, so important. While I was listening to you, I thought there are perhaps we could think of two performatives that are happening right now. Out of these horrible bad news warnings that are coming out of the UN, I read recently that there are these programs called good grief. People are going to good grief therapies to cope with this because it's so depressing. How do you explain to your children? How do you deal with this? So, and on the other hand, all these mindfulness, wellness therapies. And then on the third front for this performative, which I would call anesthetic, maybe like anesthesia to cope with something like this, is the golden age of television, which deals with performance as well. Actors are being employed, playwrights are being employed for this boom of binge-watching television. So we're kind of addicted to that and to the applications and to all this technology. And I think the other performative that might have a response is the synesthetic, not the anesthetic, but the synesthetic performance of live encounter. And that's why theater and live performance and dance is so urgent. And when I talk with my students about this, it's like, why hasn't theater disappeared in light of all this technology and all this? Because it's urgent and it calls for live action. And I think what this Encuentro calls for is that. Urgent live action right now.
Yes, I agree. I would add only, and I try to do this with my grandchildren, my children obviously are adults, is to neither scare them nor lie to them. To go to the Natural History Museum and see a dinosaur and say what happened and say how we are, to some degree, in a similar state for different reasons. But to also, as Cage says, even though, you know, one of the things I know as a theater director, if you do it, even if you don't believe it, you will believe it. So you make believe leads to make believe. So you have to cling to this blind optimism, but operate pessimistically and propagate optimistically. That's what I would say. Operate pessimistically, get it done, propagate, spread the news optimistically, long term. That's what I would say. Thank you, Antonio.
Hello, my name is Bronte, and I'm grateful for your offering and see your reverence for life and your compassion for life and the urgency of what you shared. And I also feel it's important to name what I sense into the danger of speaking to population control and the ways that that's predicated on eugenics, eugenicism, and also white supremacy, and the many ways that questions about who we speak of when we speak about humanity at large and who we speak of when we speak about the Anthropocene. So I'm curious if you would take me out to dinner for a longer combo. To delve into, as someone who sees you as my elder and who's going to inherit this earth, to speak about how we might find where we can be in concert with one another on what you share.
Okay, I have an answer and then a proposal. I'll do the proposal first because at my age I forget things. So not too much. So the proposal is, if Encuentro would give me a room, I'll take a few hours either tomorrow or Friday or Saturday and just be there. What my friend Grotowski would say, an open seminar. I'll just be there. And you come and talk.
Will there be food?
And I won't play Marina Abramovich. I'll actually talk, and whether I look into your eyes or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, now, to answer your question directly, I put it in my paper. I'm not for eugenics. I'm not for the Chinese system. I'm not for all that. And he's put it, empower women, raise living standards, and the birth rate will fall. That's the long-term solution. That's the way to do it. Empower women, raise living standards, and the birth rate will take care of itself. Right. Otherwise, what you're saying is correct. But I said that in my paper. If I publish it, I will make that clearer. But that's very, very much the program. And that's a long-term thing.
Are women
We're gonna have to go
impregnating
through
themselves?
A lot. What?
Are women impregnating themselves? I'm curious about how who are we demanding to shift? It's not, for me, it's not about who, not, because if we're requiring that,
I'm not requiring anything.
Okay.
I didn't say require.
Okay.
I said empower women. Mm-hmm. So whatever the applause indicates, take it and do it.
Okay.
And raise living standards. And as a byproduct of that, the birth rate will fall. I'm not, that's what happens. You know, it's just
right.
demonstrably what happens.
I'm curious if it's more people being born or if it's the concentration of resources in a population of a demographic of people which are predominantly rich white men. And so the question I'm curious about is, who are we speaking to when we're talking about making different choices? And what if we were more specific about who has currently endangered our planet? And it brings me deep grief to it is about empowering women, but underneath that, it's really about who is willing to surrender their resource, who's willing to shift their complicity.
Correct. I couldn't agree more. Those in power are not willing to surrender their resources. So the question then is, I use the word transformation and not revolution, because the history of revolutions have not been particularly happy certain what they come up with, because, as you've stated, the world is still hegemonic, and it's still, for all the progress, to a large degree patriarchal or patronymic. So I am for what the applause is garnering, but I am, I don't think, however, that even if we redistributed all the wealth, if the population keeps growing, there's not enough to go around. We'll all get, many will get a little better off and reach above subsistence, and okay. The very wealthy will be exterminated, that's okay. But the overall standard of living will be quite low. We need to make a fundamental change. That's what I'm saying. And that fundamental change is tied to fewer people. It's not like it never happened. In 1960, how many of you were alive in 1960? How many? Just raise your hands. So, a smattering. How many were alive in 1990? Okay, when you were alive, there were 2 billion less people on the earth than there are now. So we have to recognize that, and it's a limited sphere. So if you have another way of accomplishing it, I'm all for that. That's why I'd like to have a deep meeting, as polemical as it might get, but hopefully not polemical. I don't feel polemical on this issue. I feel like I want to accomplish it. And I also think it's an and question, not an either-or question. I think you can take power away from, if we generate the right way, from corporations, evil governments, et cetera, and empower women and lower the population. It's not a question of this or that, I don't think. That this or that is what has driven us for too long.
And I'm curious about, I guess it would be about what standard of, and this is my last question, I promise. And I think this is really important that I'm speaking and taking up space. And I'm here for the planet and speaking from this knowing. I'm curious about when we could talk about this tomorrow in the meeting with the food and the water, about my question that we'll go into tomorrow is, how do we decolonize our needs, and how do we shift what the standard of living we're talking about is? Because a redistribution of iPhones is not maybe what we're talking about, or a redistribution of huge, it's the idea of the standard of living that is unsustainable. So what is the standard of living we're speaking to? What do we really need to be on this planet and with one another and to survive?
I agree totally, and I'm not talking about the endless proliferation of iPhones. So let's meet and discuss that. I don't have answers to these problems.
Me either.
Yes, and to even expect me to have one is to be unconsciously, propelling the system that you're wanting to destroy. So I don't have answers to the problem.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your concern, and I hope to see you wherever it's determined I'll be tomorrow.
Okay, let me know.
Wow, I've stepped into a really wild, trippy dream, and I couldn't be more grateful to be sharing it with you all. So Shakespeare says that, the world's a stage and we are all actors, and there's some other person that says when there's a particular, I don't know the exact quote, but it's like, when there's a group of people that are in a room together, there's a particular unique thing that those people can work together on that no one else can. And so this is a question for you, Richard, and it's also a question for everyone in the room. This is my first Hemi Encuentro, and it does seem very emergent. And I'm a climate justice, migrant justice, drug policy activist. I really do put my body on the line constantly, and we can talk about that later. But My question is, how can we adjust how we relate to each other for the rest of this week, considering that we did use up fossil fuels that are from our dinosaur ancestors to get here? And we might, we don't know what the future is going to be like. It's not guaranteed. So how can we make the most out of this Encuentro in 2019? It's about to be the 50th anniversary of Woodstock, which I bring up because the war on drugs was a response to the counterculture movements, the third world liberation movements that were emerging in the 60s. So I really think we have a unique chance to do something here. I'm really fertile with ideas, so just ask me, because I do spend a lot of time on the border, and I have disrupted Trump in a Las Vegas hotel in the past year, and I'm really about it, So my question for you, Richard, is what are some interventions that we can use? How can we own this emergent process to reshape how we engage with each other for the rest of the week, given, the bleak future if we don't act more radically with our relationship to performance?
Well, again, I see there are many working groups out there who are working on these things. That's what the structure, the thing that makes the Encuentro great, and perhaps worth the jet fuel of those of us who flew, is this, not only the brilliance of the performance, but these working groups, which are doing exactly what you're doing. So I attended one briefly, I couldn't go to all, that Marianne Hirsch was moderating on decolonizing the mind, and I think that speaks directly to what you're talking about. So I can't tell what you to do the rest of the time, but there are many groups out there. Get like-minded people, start networks. It's what Cage said in '94 that I read. We're in this together, and therefore, although we have oppositions and we should work at them and, of course, through them, we also have commonalities, and we should try to identify them. I do feel, maybe the profoundest in the scientific sense word, I'm asking for a change in our nature, human nature, to another kind of paradigm, because that which was so successful for our species, if you take the long run, is no longer successful for certainly not for other species, and possibly not even for our own species. So there, the working groups and whatever, and you've identified yourself, and then you should say, okay, I'm going to be out in the lobby. People who want to talk about this, meet with me now, and we'll set up a time to meet later. I don't have recipes for solutions. Okay. I don't have them. That's what we need. And younger minds, yours, are going to come up with good things to do. You must.
Okay, then I volunteer to coordinate with you all a very unique happening where we take up public space together before the Encuentro is over. I'll be outside later.
Well, what is your name?
I go by La Pachamami.
Mucho gusto a todos ustedes. Me llamo Ricardo Peña y quiero platicarles un poco acerca de una experiencia que viví personalmente. Terminé la carrera de hidrobiología. Hidrobiología es el estudio de la vida en el agua. Y participé hace como 3 años en un proyecto donde fuimos a salvar a muchas especies de vida, animales, reptiles, aves, peces, crustáceos. Hace como 3 años ocurrió en México, en Cancún, en la región de Tajamar, ocurrió un ecocidio que salió la información en todos los medios de comunicación. Y participé con unos compañeros ambientalistas elaborando un dictamen donde nosotros demostramos a la Secretaría del Medio Ambiente que ahí había ocurrido un crimen contra todos los animales. Llegaron las máquinas, sorprendieron a todos y acabaron con el manglar de Tajamar en 5 horas lo que la naturaleza tardó en diseñar durante muchísimos años. El hombre egoísta, el hombre ambicioso, por su misma soberbia, destruyó ese ambiente. Me invitaron a participar, muchos maestros no querían ir por miedo a perder su trabajo. Yo elaboré junto con los ambientalistas el dictamen y demostramos que sí había ocurrido ahí un ecocidio. Y yo estuve ahí monitoreando, estuve caminando por la zona 0, la zona afectada, y con mis ojos pude ver cómo las iguanas estaban espantadas porque las máquinas habían dañado totalmente ese ecosistema. Y se emprendió una lucha contra las autoridades. Después de
Actually, I do mean to interrupt. We have to stop after a while. Your story is very good, but there are 3. Guillermo wanted to say something, and 2 other people. Then we have to stop. If you're going to make a statement, which is fine, make it brief, because we have to vacate the room. Okay. And I appreciate what you have said and the story you're told, and it can be repeated many times in many places of the world. Okay. Unfortunately.
Bueno, mi pregunta es la siguiente. Usted está hablando de que estamos viviendo una era prácticamente de exterminio, donde las futuras generaciones van a sufrir por lo que estamos viviendo actualmente, en cuanto al impacto ambiental que está ocurriendo en todo el mundo. Yo lo que le quiero decir es que, ¿cómo le vamos a hacer para ganar esas batallas? ¿Cómo le vamos a hacer?
How we were going to win those battles, I would have started my speech with that, and we would have broken into workshops, and we would have won the battles. So, okay, muchas gracias.
Okay, gracias. Hasta luego.
Thank you.
You know, I'm a Chicano disciple of Zizek, and I get a lot of trouble with my queer feminist wife from Southern California on a daily basis. But in a sense, I see your recent philosophy as a kind of Zizek from the Americas, a kind of intellectual, amazing intellectual who is constantly navigating the borders between dystopia and utopia. And all I want to say is just a little brief testimonio. How do you say? A testimonio, chingao, como se diga.
He said, whatever, a statement.
La Pocha Nostra decided that the ultimate political project was the pedagogical project, not the artwork itself. You know, so we decided to shift attention from the final artwork to the pedagogical project, not to engage young activists and artists from multiple cultures, genders, complexities into the creative process was the true transformative project. At the time, we had 2 kinds of students. We had the privileged students that came from the UK, Germany, Sweden, Canada, blah, 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 who had all their expenses paid and who were under scholarships. And then we had, of course, the quote-unquote third world participants who we always gave them a scholarship. It was like a Taco Bell menu. You know, now, 10 years later, in the new ultranationalist era, under the Trump era, the people that are applying to our workshops are people who have just been evicted recently, people with terminal physical diseases, people with mental disabilities, people who have just experienced police brutality, people who are in the process of getting deported, people who are victims of sexual assault, and these are our new students. So all I wanted to say is that, yes, the testimony that La Pocha can provide right now is parallel to this world of dystopian, utopian ideas that my beloved padrino Richard Schechner is explaining. Thank you.
Thank you for your time for sharing. I too believe that art is an amplifier, but my concern is that we've been kind of preaching to the choir. And if we cannot move those who are not in this space, then that's going to be a challenge. We have to get beyond, before we can even attack something like climate change, we have to begin to see the other as ourselves. And I don't think people in here have a problem with that, but there are those who do. Thank you.
I entirely agree, and the real problem there is that those who are poor, and there are multitudes, want to be unpoor. And the quickest route to unpoverty is not through ecological responsibility. So the great problem is, how do we get to unpoverty, to abundance, in a different way? I don't have the answer to that. But if we try to preach to the unconverted who are really desperately poor and say, you know, do this, do that, it's not going to work. So that's a huge problem. That would be a huge a conference to how to address the dual problem, that people who have very little really want and deserve more. And that sometimes some of the things that I'm talking about is the process is a privilege. I recognize that as a problem. I have not thought through to the end of it. I'm going to try.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo quería hacer una pregunta un poco para volver a la metáfora del Titanic. Pensaba que también los que se salvan en esa película, si no la entendí mal, son siempre los más privilegiados, ¿no? Y que hay cierta indiferencia al ver cómo se hunde el barco con todas esas personas. Lo que pensaba es que hay poblaciones a las que el antropoceno ya le llegó. No sé si hay mucho tiempo para organizarnos, yo quiero creer que sí. El tema, en relación a esto que pensaba con el performance, veía, por ejemplo, los videos que hacía Jesús Rodríguez en el Senado, que ayudaban de alguna manera a por lo menos hablar del tema cuando hace el video sobre el maíz o sobre los tacos de carnita. ¿Qué papel o qué rol puede cumplir, qué eficacia puede llegar a tener el performance para movilizar esta indiferencia de muchos de los más privilegiados frente a estas personas a los que el antropoceno ya le llegó? Esa pregunta.
Very, very briefly, I very deeply admire and appreciate what Jesus is doing, and other performances I've seen here also, Los Miserables, for example. And I think, you know, two things. One, we do what we can do. Don't throw your hands up and say, because I can't get to everyone, I'll get to no one. We do what we can do. And so if your task is to make the already converted more converted and make their waves, things have repercussions. And I feel that some of the popular art in Mexico, I mean, there's a huge heritage of pop art, street art in Mexico, you know, Diego Rivera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Jesus Rodriguez. So that's where you start to talk to the, quote, unconverted. Talk to the taxi driver. Be prepared for a pushback, but still have the conversation. You know, we're meeting people all the time who are not, quote, privileged, quote, as we are. So the question is, how do we engage? Because this is a question, I feel, of life and death for their children, if not for them, you know? And therefore, we're doing a service to ourselves, to them, et cetera, et cetera. There are multiple ways, and I do think we should have a conference to discuss different strategies. One room, how do you talk to the converted? One room, how do you talk to the unconverted? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are multiple ways to go about this. And I also think, and this is what Cage was saying, we shouldn't lose our sense of joy, participation, making art, having fun. It's no good to turn in this horrible thing and make us all Protestants. It just won't work. Don't go the guilt shame route. Go the have fun and change route. Have fun, change, not guilt shame die. See?
Gracias.
Yo considero que un comienzo tiene que ver también con las relaciones y cómo las producimos. Y en este momento sé que hay muchas personas que se quedaron con ganas de hablar, creo que con ganas de comunicar. Estamos en un encuentro, estamos a la mitad de él, no dejemos de hacerlo, para eso estamos acá. Pero también es cierto que estamos en un espacio en el que hay una maravillosa planta técnica que ha estado apoyando esto y que está terminando su horario. Creo que uno de los primeros principios, ¿no?, para relacionarnos tiene que ver también con eso, con estar siempre conscientes de la alteridad del otro, del cuerpo del otro, de la luz, del espacio que habitamos, del lugar que ocupamos. Y bueno, les agradecemos muchísimo esta noche, especialmente el placer de tener a Richard Schechner en el Juan Ruiz de Alarcón y a Teatro UNAM, a todo el equipo de Teatro UNAM. Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.